Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Rockies Daily. I'm your host, Scott Ayers, where we talk all things Colorado Rockies. Whether it's your first time or your last time, I'm glad you're here. We've got a lot to talk about, so let's jump into it. And first, let's talk about the Colorado Rockies farm system, because let's face it, last year was a bad year. And, usually when you have a team that struggles, a team that's not going to make the playoffs, a team that maybe they had the worst record in baseball. Maybe they had one of the worst records of all time. You hope that you can hang your hat on a farm system or a future that says, hey, we've got X, Y, and Z coming down the pipeline, and we're going to be good. And unfortunately for the Rockies, they're in the bottom third when it comes to farm systems. And you do need to obviously take it with a grain of salt. In 2024, the Rockies were as high as 12th when it came to a farm system before they called up Chase Dollander, Zach Veen, Karros, and Amador as well. So they called up a bunch of these guys that would obviously affect their rankings a little. However, it is a bit concerning because teams are usually able to reload with the guys that they have in their system. And for the Rockies, they really only have two guys that the MLB deems as top 100 guys, Ethan Holiday and Charlie Condon. Now, we talked about Ethan Holiday in our last show. We've talked about Charlie Condon before. And Condon's really the only guy that is expected to come up in 2026, as well as Cole Carrig. So those are two guys that you'll probably see next year. Charlie Condon is kind of holding the weight in all this for the farm system in terms of just putting your hope into someone in this system currently. He's got a ton of power. We've talked about it before. He could even start opening day for the Colorado Rockies. And obviously you could think one way, well, what's the ranking going to look like on MLB.com? Are the Rockies going to drop in their rankings? Reality, I don't really care if that ranking drops to 28th. Well, I would care a little, but I would care more if Condon gets brought up and is successful at the Rockies. That's what I care about more than anything else. And that's kind of the hope in 2026. If there's one storyline to follow, it is what will that development look like for Charlie Condon? Because let's face it, there's other guys in the minors right now or in the farm system that just really haven't panned out. In 2021 first round pick, Benny Montgomery has just dealt with a ton of injuries. Superstar speed, but still in playing double A baseball. We obviously have pitcher Gabriel Hughes, who's starting to make his recovery from Tommy John surgery. So there's different guys that are working through different injuries, struggles, everything like that. And that's not to say if you're not a top 100 prospect, you're not going to get called up or you're not going to make it to the major league level. That's not how it works, right? There's so many stories across baseball where guys weren't in that top 100 and now they're playing at the major league level. But it is a good indicator of maybe the strength or the depth of a farm system. And so for the Rockies, really only have one guy in that top 100 that's going to be called up. Ethan Holiday is probably going to be a top 10 prospect by the time he's ready to be called up. He's only 18 years old. He's already 19th in the rankings. Super excited to see what he can become. But until then, we can only look at the guys that we're looking at here in the near future. And there's a couple different options, and we've talked about Hughes, we've talked about Condon, and obviously Cole Carrig. But outside of that, it will be interesting to see who is actually going to make an impact for this team, because that's what we're all searching for. Who are the impact players that are actually going to bring any sort of value? And you go back to the trade machine we've talked about in shows past. Who can you trade for prospects and everything like that? That's going to kind of be something else to look out for. If the Rockies think, hey, we just need to sell the next couple of years and get these prospects, one, obviously make sure you're making trades that make sense, and two, getting prospects that you actually think will develop into something. Because that's a whole other thing. You can trade for 3 prospects, but if they all stink, then you're just going to be in the same spot you were in 3 years earlier. So that's kind of a brief rundown on the farm system. We'll do more deep dives onto certain players in our system. But obviously being in the bottom third is a bit concerning considering how bad the Rockies were last year. They've obviously called up a bunch of guys, so that affects their rankings. However, if you're a really bad team, you probably want to be in like the top 15, top 10 year over end, just, to really ensure that you've got some guys coming up in the system that will make an impact down the road. But regardless, that's a quick rundown on our farm system. Let's move into our division foe, the Arizona Diamondbacks, because they are in the heart of the Alex Bregman race. And, actually, it was funny enough, on one of their sports talk radios, Dan Bickley said that it seems like it's almost a done deal that Alex Bregman is going to the Arizona Diamondbacks. Now, you have to take things with a grain of salt, right, in this age where people can say anything, right? I could, on this show, say the Rockies are trading for Paul Skeens. All they're giving up are Chris Bryant's tonsils, right? You would have to fact check me, but you have no way of doing it. Boom, I said it. We're getting Paul Skeens for a pair of tonsils. Okay, great. So we can say whatever the heck we want. Now, obviously, Bickley probably a little more connected into that, the trade rumors and everything like that right now. But at the end of the day, it's just rumors. That being said, if the Rockies, and I say trade rumors, free agent rumors as well, but if the Diamondbacks were to get Bregman and somehow keep Ketel Marte, that becomes a real problem for the NL West, because the Diamondbacks are already extremely successful just a couple of seasons ago, making the World Series. They've obviously taken a dip in productivity. However, they're still a pretty darn good team. That being said, it does feel like if Bregman comes to Arizona, they'd probably trade Marte for some sort of depth throughout their team. But it is just funny, like, looking at across the NL West, the Rockies, hey, give us Nicky Lopez. We don't want this Bregman guy. Edwin Diaz, the best closer in baseball, we've got John Brebbia in the minors. Though that's kind of the feeling of a Rockies fan, is oftentimes you're watching these other teams make moves to be ready to win now, and we're just sitting on our hands. And I get it. Right now, when it makes sense for the Rockies to go after Alex Bregman or some of these other guys that are going to be extremely expensive, that are a little bit older, that are trying to win right now. But it's just hard to watch year after year after year where the Rockies they don't do anything. We're just banking on minor league infielders right now, like Nicky Lopez and some of these other guys that they've signed that maybe they'll be productive. Maybe they'll be called up and help this team win 50 games. But it's just hard to see sometimes, is the Diamondbacks, the Padres, and the Dodgers all very realistically could make deep playoff runs. The Diamondbacks maybe not as much as the Padres and the Dodgers. The Dodgers, obviously, they'll spend a gazillion dollars if they have to, and that's that. But it's just hard being in a division that has the success that it has, and kind of just watching it all happen, right? I think it can be easy as a fan to say, well, we'll just wait until their prime is done, and that's when our team will emerge. But in reality, the Dodgers could be good for the next 30 years based on how they spend money. And obviously some of these other teams might fluctuate. But for the Rockies, you can't let that deter you from trying to build something. And I'm not saying it is deterring them. I think it has in the past, right, in the last 3-4 years. I know Dick Monfort always will say, hey, we want to win. We want to win. We want to win. But we haven't seen much winning really outside that playoff series, or playoff game, not even series, playoff game against the Chicago Cubs in 2018. So, rant aside, if the Diamondbacks were to get someone like Bregman, the NL West would be a lot of fun, just with the amount of talent and the amount of teams that could make the playoffs. Because even the Giants, right, they're a competitive team, even with their recent struggles. So the NL West continues to be, obviously one of the best divisions of baseball. The Rockies just happen to be kind of the floor mat, the doormat right now. And I don't think any of us want that. I think that a lot of us want to see some improvement. And I don't expect 2026 to be the year where the Rockies shock the world, right? But you're going to be playing against some really good teams. And so the Rockies better have a plan, because these other teams have plans. The Padres have kind of sold their farm system to be good now. The Dodgers are spending. The Diamondbacks seemingly will be willing to spend. So it's an interesting time. It's an interesting time in the NL West, because it is always always competitive. And the Rockies have to figure out what they want to do here in the next couple of seasons. So, that being said, they're figuring something out. Antonio Senzatella is moving to the bullpen, and he is kind of the perfect example going from that last segment to this one. Because Senzatella was part of that pitching group that I think a lot of us were really excited for, with Marquez, Senzatella, Kyle Freeland, kind of as the three front men for what was seemingly going to be a great rotation for years to come for the Rockies. And, right, 2018, they were great. 2020, Antonio Senzatella had a 3.4 ERA, 1.2 whip. He was extremely successful in his first couple of seasons in the major leagues. 2021, he signs a 5-year, $50 million contract. Give that man some money. And that's when things kind of just fell apart. He wouldn't have an ERA under 4.4 ever again in his career. He dealt with a lot of bad injuries. 2022 towards ACL, 2023 required Tommy John surgery, and then just this last year, 6.65 ERA, 1.8 WHIP. He just didn't have anything going for him in the last couple of seasons just due to these injuries. And so you can't even be mad when he was offered that contract, because I think all Rockies fans were really excited to see what this team was building. And then obviously it was mistake after mistake after mistake. We obviously had the Arenado trade in there. And obviously then there's just bad luck like the injuries here. And so now Senzatella's at this point where he's coming out of the bullpen. I don't know necessarily what much more he'll be able to provide. But it's obviously just a bummer to see someone who was once so promising for the Rockies now be in the position that he's in. And a lot of it just due to these injuries and just bad luck, I think, more than anything else. Because he really was successful in those first couple seasons with the Rocks. But that being said, the hope is maybe he'll be a solid middle reliever for the Rockies. I think that's the hope for him in 2026. We'll just have to wait and see, though. Yeah, it's just a bummer. It's just a bummer for a guy like that. So, anyways, let's move into our last topic here. Luis Arraez, still a free agent, and still would be a perfect fit for the Rockies. Won a couple of batting titles, a great single or double hitter. It would just fit extremely well at Coors Field. We've talked about him a couple of times, but someone like that would be just massive for this lineup, especially for a lineup where they're rolling out a bunch of young guys. And he could play first, second, really anywhere in that middle infield. And he could be really a nice veteran presence for the Rockies. It obviously seems like the Rockies aren't going to make any really big splashes, but this is one that they should really consider. He's just far too talented not to look at. And as we approach the new year, we obviously get closer to spring training. We get closer to these guys reporting for camp. And you just want to see the Rockies make a move just to have a competent lineup. We're not expecting a world-class lineup. We're not expecting a team to win 80 games. But you are expecting to see the quality on the field improve. And unless a signing's made, you're not really going to see that right now. Unless the development of, Karros, Amador improves. And it's just hard to bank on these guys, just hearing about how, obviously, like, Amador's offseason is going, everything like that. It's just a little concerning hearing about his struggles right now. That's where you bring in a vet who can then, let Amador figure things out by not making him start every single day, and he's batting like 180 and can't hit anything. You bring in a guy who actually brings just a solidifying presence. Just help this team figure things out. But until then, we can only speculate of who the Rockies are actually going to go after. We haven't heard too many things in the rumor mill recently, and obviously maybe we'll hear more once the new year kicks in. But right now, we're just waiting to see if the Rockies will make a move for a major league player. They've made some minor league signings. Major league player, though, would be really beneficial. But until then, I'm Scott Ayers. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you tomorrow.